Today is March 4th, and the quote for today is entitled, "Face Your Problems," which is very similar to yesterday's quote about dealing with obstacles. If we are to make steady advancement, we need to confront and deal with our problems on a regular basis. People get into trouble when they ignore their problems. Are you doing something similar with your spiritual problems? So, if I have a problem, oftentimes I don't even admit to myself that I have it. That's a bigger problem, perhaps, than the problem itself. If I don't acknowledge the problem, then obviously I can't do anything. So it begins with acknowledging. Now, why don't we admit to ourselves we have a problem? Sometimes we have an image of ourselves, of a person who wouldn't have that problem. So it's so hard to admit we have it because that would go totally against our self-image. And it's so difficult to think of ourselves in a way which is different from our self-image. I think of myself in this way, and this kind of person would definitely not have that problem. So even though I have that problem, I don't acknowledge it. I don't see it. I don't notice it. So number one problem, we don't notice the problem. Okay, number two problem, we do notice the problem, but the problem seems so overwhelming, or it makes us so uncomfortable that we would prefer not to deal with it. I said, why should I deal with it? Because I don't even know how to deal with it. I've tried to deal with it before. I've failed. It's just my nature is such that I cannot deal with this problem. So I'm just not going to deal with it and hope that someday it goes away. Or perhaps dealing with the problem makes me very uncomfortable, or it's very painful to go through a process where I have to face it, where I have to work on it. It's just, I don't know if I can work on it. I don't know if I have the strength to work on it. I don't know if I can make the adjustments in my consciousness to work on it. So then I neglect it. Or I'll suppress it, or I may pretend the problem is really not as bad as it's made out to be, or I thought it was bad, but really it's not really that bad. Or if I suppress it, then I won't even feel it. That's part of not acknowledging it. I don't allow it to come up. So it's there, it's existing within me. It does play out, but I don't acknowledge that that's my problem, because it's so difficult to see our own problems. And not so difficult to see others' problems. All right, so the lesson for today is very simple, and I've talked about this before. The worst thing we can do is not face a problem. The worst thing we can possibly do is have a problem and not deal with it out of fear. When you go into the problem, you start working on it, you can work through it. You can improve it. Your life will get better. If you run away from it, if you suppress it, if you pretend it doesn't exist, you can't do anything to improve it. And the problem is that difficulty that you're having is something it's going to be affecting you. And until you face it, head off and deal with it, that problem is always going to come from the left side, from in front of you, from the right side, from behind you. It's not going to go away. Just like sometimes we'll take marriage for an example. Sometimes people have problems in their marriage and they don't want to face them. They don't want to deal with them. So inevitably, if you do that, the problems will keep surfacing. Sometimes you think, no, it was just a particular incident, or we've actually worked on it when we haven't really worked on it, and the problem keeps coming up again. So whenever a problem keeps coming up again, it's a sign that Krishna is telling us, you really need to take notice, and you really need to work on it, because if you don't change something about how you deal with the problem, or you don't change your attitude towards the problem or the situation that's causing the problem, it's going to keep coming up. I think that's obvious. I think it's simple. But even though it's simple and obvious, not all of us are willing to deal with our problems. Sometimes we say things like, this is how I am, I can't change, which in many cases is not true. This is how you are is true, but you can change. Quite often you can change, or there are little things you can do to deal with it, to go out of your way to make it better. Let's say the problem is simple. You're a very introverted person. You're not social. You're not good with relationships and interaction. And it's having some kind of negative effect on your work that you're doing for Krishna. Or the relationships you're having with devotees, specifically if you're a leader. And relationships are very important. And you say, this is how I am. I'm not a social person. I never was, probably never will be. I like to be alone. Don't like to talk to people so much. But now you're in a position, let's say, where you have to be more social to be successful in your service. So you may remain introverted and unsocial, but there are things you can do to be more social. You can learn. And just go out of your way to ask people how they are, how have they been, can I do anything for you, let me know if I can help, answer your emails on time, so on and so forth. So you may stay as an introvert or as a private person, but you do a few things that are very important for relationships. So you haven't changed your nature, you've just changed your behavior. And that's something we can all do. If I behave in a certain way and it helps people, I can probably do that. If I say I can't, you're never going to try. So that's the idea of today's quote. Face it, deal with it, try to improve it, work on it. You can always do something about your problems. And if you don't, you'll see them resurfacing again and again. So if there's anything in your life that keeps coming up again and again, perhaps it's bad relationships, perhaps it's bad japa, perhaps it's financial problems, whatever it may be, perhaps you lose your determination periodically. It's probably something that you need to deal with. You need to confront, you need to admit and work on. Hare Krishna.